The alien girl mocked her human classmate, then learned where he truly came from. Some had wings, some scales, others glowed faintly with bioluminescence. Among all of them, a single human boy sat quietly at the back. His hair was brown, his skin slightly tanned, and he seemed ordinary in every way. Compared to the sharp claws, armored hides, or towering forms of his classmates, he looked fragile, almost too small for this place. A loud laugh broke through the hum of voices. The source was an alien girl named Zarina, her skin pale blue with streaks of violet, her eyes bright and sharp. She was one of the top students, feared and admired in equal measure. Her species prided itself on intelligence and speed, and Zarina was no exception. Her movements were quick, precise, and commanding. She leaned back in her chair, letting her tentacle-like hair sway slightly, and looked directly at the human boy. "How does it feel to sit there knowing you are completely useless?" she said, her voice carrying across the room. The human did not flinch. He merely adjusted his posture and continued writing in his notebook, as if her words were invisible. Other students giggled nervously, unsure whether to join in her mockery or keep their distance. Zarina's laughter grew louder. "You really do nothing. Humans are fragile, slow, weak. How did you even get accepted here?" she added, turning her gaze to the teacher with a smug smile. The teacher, an elder with shimmering green skin and multiple eyes, said nothing. The academy was built on the belief that every species, no matter how small or weak, had the right to learn. But he also knew that discipline came from experience, not words. He moved on to another student, leaving Zarina's laughter hanging in the air. The human boy named Kale wrote calmly, his handwriting neat and precise. He did not answer. There was no spark of anger, no embarrassment, no hesitation. From the outside, it seemed as though he had no reaction at all. Some students whispered that humans had no pride, no fight. Others simply ignored him, considering him beneath their attention. Zarina, however, could not let it go. "Hey, human, are you even alive in there? Or is your brain broken?" she called again. Kale looked up briefly, his brown eyes calm. He did not reply. Instead, he turned back to his work. Zarina's expression faltered for a moment, replaced with confusion. Most students expected the weak to beg, to retaliate, or at least show some reaction. But Kale's silence was unshakable. She blinked rapidly and leaned forward. "You think ignoring me will save you? You're pathetic." Kale's lips barely moved as he murmured a single word, almost lost in the noise of the classroom. "Observation." That was all. He returned to his notes. Zarina froze. The word hit her unexpectedly. It was not arrogance, not fear, not desperation. It was calm, pure calm. She frowned but shook it off, deciding this human was simply strange, not dangerous. Classes in the Interstellar Academy were not easy. Lessons covered interstellar politics, survival strategies, ancient histories, and the intricacies of countless civilizations. The teachers assumed that students understood the importance of strategy and skill in every challenge. Kale sat through each lesson quietly, absorbing every detail. Zarina, on the other hand, often dominated discussions, her sharp tongue earning both respect and resentment. When it came to group projects, she always chose students she deemed strong and capable, leaving Kale out of her calculations entirely. One day, the academy announced a practical assignment, a simulation of a survival scenario on a distant, hostile planet. Groups would be randomly assigned, and each student's performance would determine their ranking. The alien girl smirked as she saw Kale placed in a group with weaker species. She leaned over to whisper to a friend, "He'll fail before sunrise." Humans are meant to be protected, not compete. Kale did not hear. He focused on memorizing the survival protocols, scanning the maps, and calculating the resources needed. His mind worked differently from others. Where Zarina relied on confidence and physical ability, Kale relied on analysis, patience, and observation. No one noticed him preparing quietly in the corner, but his preparation would prove crucial. The day of the simulation arrived. The students were transported to a dense jungle world with towering trees, thick vines, and aggressive wildlife. The simulation was meant to test intelligence, physical ability, and adaptability. Most students immediately ran to establish camps, arguing over territory and resources. Zarina commanded her team with authority, barking orders and taking the lead. She expected efficiency and obedience, and most followed. Kale's group, however, approached the jungle differently. He observed the terrain carefully, noticed subtle signs of predators, and directed his team to safer paths. He moved slowly, but each decision was precise. At first, Zarina did not notice. She was too busy mocking another team member who tripped over a root. "See, some species just can't handle even a small challenge," she whispered to her friend, glancing in Kale's direction. He did not respond as usual. Hours passed and the challenges grew. Simulated predators appeared, the weather changed rapidly, and the terrain became more dangerous. Zarina's group was forced to retreat when a large simulated beast cornered them. Panic spread as her students argued, blaming each other. Zarina's confidence cracked slightly. She was skilled, but the chaos around her began to show cracks in her dominance. Meanwhile, Kale's group moved quietly and efficiently. They avoided the predators, found safe food sources, and set traps to gather supplies. Kale's instructions were calm and concise, guiding his teammates without raising their stress. By evening, his group had secured a safe camp, while Zarina's team was scattered, tired, and frustrated. For the first time, the alien girl felt something unfamiliar: unease. That night around the campfire, Zarina watched Kale silently. She noticed how he remained calm despite hunger and exhaustion. He calculated the risks of each path before moving. He did not panic. He did not boast. His presence commanded quiet respect, not through words but through action. Zarina could not deny it. This human boy whom she had mocked was far from weak. The next morning brought another challenge: a logic-based obstacle course combined with physical tests. Most students relied on their natural abilities: speed, strength, agility. Kale relied on reasoning, foresight, and teamwork. He analyzed the course carefully, predicted pitfalls, and coordinated with his teammates. Zarina, who had once dominated every test, found herself outmatched by the quiet human who had once seemed fragile. By the end of the day, Kale's group completed the course with minimal errors, while many of the traditionally strong students struggled. Zarina's pride burned. She had expected to excel effortlessly, yet this human boy outperformed expectations without any display of force or arrogance. After the simulation, the instructor praised Kale quietly, noting his ability to combine intelligence, patience, and observation to survive challenges that others could not. Zarina's smile faded as she realized that her perception of humans had been wrong. They were not weak. They were controlled, measured, and disciplined. Kale's calm strength made her feel something she had never experienced before: respect mixed with unease. The week continued with lessons on interstellar history. Zarina once again dominated the discussions, speaking of her species, victories, and accomplishments. Kale listened quietly, asking questions only when necessary. He did not seek attention, but his presence now carried weight. Other students began to notice. The whispers returned, but this time they were different. "That human, he's not what we thought." Zarina's attitude shifted slowly. She could not openly admit that she had misjudged him, but her mind reeled with the realization. For the first time, someone had challenged her assumptions, not through aggression or defiance, but through quiet competence. She could not dismiss him with laughter anymore. By the end of the first part of the semester, the Academy announced an upcoming evaluation that would require each student to present the history of their species. It would not be enough to rely on intelligence alone. Students had to prove understanding, strategy, and survival knowledge. Zarina prepared confidently, expecting to shine. Kale prepared quietly, as always, studying his species' history with care, understanding not just facts but lessons learned from survival and endurance. The alien girl thought about him often, more than she cared to admit. She had mocked him, laughed at him, and called him weak. And yet he continued, unbothered, unshaken, and competent beyond expectation. She could not figure out why he did not retaliate or prove himself through aggression. She only knew that the calm human boy had changed the way she saw the world, and perhaps, unknowingly, the way she saw herself. By the end of Part 1, the stage was set. The Interstellar Academy would soon test not just intelligence and strength, but history, survival, and instinct. Kale, the quiet human, had already proven that appearances were deceiving. Zarina, the proud alien girl, was beginning to learn a lesson she would never forget. Sometimes, the most dangerous beings are not the ones who fight the loudest, but the ones who survive quietly and perfectly prepared. The Academy's halls were alive with excitement and nervous energy. The next evaluation was announced. Every student had to present the history of their species and explain how their civilization survived, evolved, and became capable of joining the Interstellar Alliance. It was more than a test of knowledge. It was a test of understanding, strategy, and adaptability. Some species, proud of their victories, prepared with arrogance. Others, cautious and careful, prepared with study. Kale, the human boy, prepared quietly, reading volumes of history, noting patterns, and considering not just the victories but the failures of his species. Zarina, now more curious than dismissive, noticed him often. She had mocked him before, laughed at his fragility, and expected him to fail any challenge. Yet here he was, calm, methodical, and seemingly unbothered by the pressure. It annoyed her, though she could not admit why. There was something in his quiet presence that commanded attention without effort. The day of the evaluation arrived. The students were brought to a large auditorium, its walls glowing with the history of the galaxy projected in moving images. One by one, the alien races presented their histories. Zarina went first, proudly describing her species, victories in countless wars, their clever strategies, and their domination of several star systems. She spoke with flair, showcasing maps of conquered planets, military formations, and advanced technology her ancestors had designed. Applause followed, and Zarina's chest swelled with pride. She looked to Kale with a smirk, expecting him to falter, to stumble, or to shrink beneath her shadow. Kale rose quietly when his turn came. He did not walk with pomp. He did not speak loudly to capture attention. Instead, he moved calmly to the front, his eyes scanning the audience. He began to speak softly but clearly, explaining that humanity's history was not one of simple conquest or immediate victory. Humans, he said, did not dominate the stars at first because we were the strongest. We survived because we learned to endure. A murmur passed through the room. Some students looked confused. Others whispered among themselves. Zarina tilted her head, curious. This was not the weak display she expected. Kale continued, explaining the early history of humanity, a history that few non-humans truly understood. He spoke of Earth, a small blue planet teeming with life but also vulnerable. He described how humans fought each other in countless wars, how disease, famine, and natural disasters wiped out millions at a time. Our victories were never easy, Kale said. Each time we rose, we faced extinction. Yet we learned. We adapted. We survived because we understood the cost of arrogance. Zarina's smirk faltered. She had imagined humans as simple creatures, fragile and naive, lucky to exist in a galaxy dominated by stronger races. She did not expect what she was hearing, a species that had endured the worst of its own failures and emerged smarter, more resilient, and capable of facing anything. Kale continued, describing humanity's first steps into space. Unlike other species, humans had not expanded aggressively. They had observed, learned, and prepared. Early starships were fragile, prone to failure, and humans lost entire crews in exploration missions. Yet each failure taught us something, he explained. We learned to adapt, to improve, to survive even in the harshest conditions. Strength without control is useless. We survived because we knew when to act and when to wait. The auditorium was silent. Even Tsarina, usually so quick to interrupt or mock, listened intently. She could see now that her assumptions had been wrong. The human boy she had mocked, laughed at, and underestimated was not simply surviving. He was explaining how his species had mastered survival itself. He spoke of the great crises humanity had faced. Cosmic storms that destroyed entire colonies, rogue machines that hunted them, and even encounters with unknown life forms that were far stronger than humans. Each disaster, Kale explained, had taught humans to plan, to think ahead, and to endure. Humans are not fragile, he said calmly. We are controlled. We have learned the value of patience, observation, and preparation. That is our strength. The alien girl's eyes widened slightly. She had never heard such confidence paired with such humility. Humans did not boast. They did not dominate for the sake of pride. They survived because they understood the cost of power, the danger of arrogance, and the need for restraint. He spoke next of humanity's greatest wars, wars fought not with overwhelming power but with clever strategy and adaptation. Entire fleets had been destroyed, colonies had been lost, and civilizations on Earth had risen and fallen. Each time, humans had rebuilt, stronger and wiser. We are a species that remembers every mistake, Kale said. We learn from them. That is why we endure when others fail. Tsarina shifted slightly in her seat. She could not deny the evidence. The human before her, small and quiet, represented a species that had survived where countless stronger species had fallen. Her pride felt challenged, not by physical strength, but by intellect, patience, and endurance. She felt an unfamiliar emotion, respect mixed with fear. Kale concluded his presentation by showing not images of conquest, but lessons learned. Maps of lost colonies, diagrams of failed starships, and timelines of crises that humanity had survived. Our story is not about power, he said. It is about survival, adaptation, and understanding the true cost of action. That is what allowed humans to rise in the galaxy, not brute strength, not dominance, but controlled endurance. The auditorium was silent for a moment. Then applause began, slowly at first, then growing louder. Some students looked impressed, others confused, but all understood one thing clearly. Humanity was not weak. The species they had dismissed as fragile and unremarkable had endured more than anyone could imagine. Tsarina felt a strange mix of emotions. She had mocked this human boy for being weak, and yet here he was, commanding respect without raising his voice, without showing off, without needing to prove himself through aggression. Her mind raced as she realized that the very qualities she had once scorned, patience, observation, restraint, were what made humans dangerous in ways her people could not yet understand. After the evaluation, the teachers discussed the results quietly among themselves. Kale's presentation had shifted perceptions. Many had assumed humans were expendable, weak, or lucky. That assumption was shattered. Even Tsarina's peers who had joined her in mocking him looked at him differently now. Some whispered, "The human, he is not what we thought." Tsarina approached Kale later that day. She did not know what to say at first. Her usual arrogance felt out of place. "Why didn't you fight back?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Kale looked at her calmly, his brown eyes steady. "Because fighting is easy," he said. Surviving requires patience, planning, and endurance. Strength is nothing without control." The alien girl did not respond. She could feel the weight of his words. She had thought humans were weak because they were small, fragile, and quiet. But she had been wrong. Their strength was hidden, controlled, and far more dangerous than anything she had imagined. The days that followed were tense. Students whispered in corridors, teachers debated the implications, and Zarina struggled with her own pride. She had always believed that strength was obvious, measured in speed, agility, or power. But Kale had shown her a new kind of strength, one that did not need to be displayed, yet demanded respect. Kale, as always, remained calm. He did not gloat. He did not seek attention. He continued his studies, quietly observing, quietly preparing. The alien girl found herself watching him often, trying to understand how someone so small could hold so much command simply by being himself. The Academy soon announced a new challenge, a live survival trial on a hostile planet without advanced technology. Students would need to demonstrate skill, instinct, and strategy in real conditions. Zarina's pride flared. She had trained, she had prepared, and she expected to dominate. But a small seed of doubt lingered in her mind. Kale's history presentation had changed everything. She realized that this human boy was more than he seemed, and that the coming trial would reveal truths she had never expected. That night, as Zarina prepared for the trial, she found herself thinking of Kale. She had mocked him, assumed him weak, and expected to shine above him. Now she understood that she had underestimated a species that survived not because of brute strength, but because of controlled endurance, careful observation, and the ability to endure what others could not. Kale, meanwhile, packed quietly in his room. He reviewed the planet's environmental data, considered possible threats, and planned multiple strategies. He did not seek attention or glory, he only sought understanding. For him, survival was not about showing off. It was about preparation, patience, and quiet action. When the trial began, students were transported to a jungle planet teeming with life, dangerous predators, and unpredictable weather. Zarina led her team confidently, barking orders and expecting obedience. Kale's team moved slowly, carefully, analyzing the terrain and adapting to the environment. The difference was immediately clear. Zarina relied on confidence and instinct, while Kale relied on observation and planning. By the end of the first day, Zarina's team struggled to cope with the dangers, while Kale's team moved efficiently, avoiding hazards and making safe progress. The alien girl watched him from a distance, her pride clashing with the growing realization that she had misjudged him. She had thought humans were weak, fragile, and naive. She was beginning to see that they were something else entirely, patient, prepared, and quietly unstoppable. By nightfall, Zarina could not deny the truth. The human boy she had mocked was no longer the one to be underestimated. He was the one who observed, learned, and survived. And she knew, deep down, that the coming days would test more than just skill. They would test her assumptions, her pride, and the very way she understood strength itself. The jungle planet was alive with danger. Towering trees stretched high into the sky, their thick vines twisting and coiling like serpents. Strange creatures rustled in the undergrowth, some so large their shadows darkened entire clearings. Streams of water cut through the land, their currents swift and unpredictable. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of alien flora was heavy, almost suffocating. For most students, the planet was overwhelming, and for many, it was terrifying. Zarina led her team through the dense vegetation with confidence. She moved quickly, her instincts sharp, her commands precise. "Stay close," she barked, glancing at her teammates who struggled to keep pace. "Watch for predators. Do not get distracted." Her skin glimmered faintly under the thick canopy, a sign of heightened stress, though she would not admit it. Her team admired her leadership, though some whispered that her reliance on instinct left them exposed to unseen dangers. Kale's group, in contrast, moved silently and deliberately. He paused frequently, studying the ground, listening to the sounds of the jungle, observing subtle movements that indicated predators or hidden dangers. His teammates followed his guidance without question. Unlike Zarina, Kale did not command loudly. He did not assert dominance. Instead, his calm presence encouraged others to trust his judgment. The first true test came when the group encountered a river. The current was stronger than expected, and the riverbed was slippery with algae. Zarina's team rushed across without careful thought. One student slipped, another lost their footing, and a small landslide of rocks forced them back to the bank. Panic spread quickly. Zarina's commands became sharper, more frantic. Her confidence, once unshakable, now wavered as she tried to regain control. Kale assessed the situation carefully. He noted the depth, the speed of the current, and the safest path for crossing. He instructed his team to gather vines and fallen branches to create a makeshift bridge. They tested each plank, moved slowly, and crossed without incident. Kale did not rush. He did not panic. Every step was deliberate, every choice calculated. By the time Zarina's team finally managed to cross the river, Kale's group was already miles ahead, establishing a safe campsite with food and water from the environment. Zarina watched from a distance, her pride stinging. She had assumed humans were weak, fragile, and unfit for survival. And yet, here was Kale, quiet, methodical, and far more effective than her own team, who relied on instinct and confidence alone. She clenched her fists and turned away, unwilling to admit the truth. But she could not ignore it. That evening, the jungle revealed another danger, a pack of large predators hunting in coordinated groups. They were intelligent, aggressive, and capable of tracking prey over long distances. Zarina's team panicked when they heard the growls, scattering in fear. One student screamed as a creature lunged, narrowly missing them. Zarina tried to organize them, but the chaos was too great. Her team's training, impressive as it had seemed in the academy, faltered in the unpredictable reality of the jungle. Kale's group, however, responded differently. He had already noticed tracks leading toward them and had predicted the predator's approach. He directed his team to remain silent, stay downwind, and use natural cover. When the predators came close, Kale instructed his team to create diversions with rocks and branches, leading the creatures away from their camp. Not a single teammate was harmed. He did not strike or fight aggressively. He simply outsmarted the threat with careful observation and strategy. The alien girl could hardly believe what she was seeing. The human she had mocked was not only surviving but thriving under conditions that had broken stronger, more confident students. She began to understand that Kale's strength was not visible like hers or her species. It was hidden, controlled, and far more dangerous. The next day brought another challenge, a steep mountain with jagged cliffs, home to both predators and treacherous terrain. Zarina's team climbed quickly, relying on strength and agility, but the path was narrow, and one misstep led to a near-fatal fall for a teammate. Panic set in, and Zarina struggled to maintain control. She barked orders, but her voice was sharp, anxious, and less effective than usual. Kale studied the mountain carefully before making a move. He noticed handholds hidden under moss, paths that would reduce risk, and subtle changes in the rock that indicated instability. He guided his team with calm, deliberate instructions, testing each foothold, signaling when to move, and ensuring that everyone was safe. By the time they reached the top, Kale's group had not suffered a single injury, while Zarina's team was bruised, exhausted, and demoralized. The alien girl's frustration grew. Her confidence, built on years of training, victories, and recognition, could not withstand the quiet competence of the human. She tried to rationalize it. Kale had luck, perhaps, or the environment was favorable. But deep down, she knew it was more than luck. The human had something she did not yet understand, an ability to remain calm, observe, adapt, and survive without the need for showmanship. Later that afternoon, the trial reached its climax. A massive creature, larger than any seen in the simulation before, appeared. It was a predator of terrifying size with armored scales and powerful limbs. Its eyes glowed faintly in the shadows, and its roar shook the ground. Zarina's team froze. They had never faced such a creature in reality, only in simulations. Fear gripped them and their training faltered under the pressure. Kale, however, remained calm. He studied the creature's movements, noting patterns in its hunting behavior. He instructed his team to use terrain to their advantage, guiding them to higher ground, behind natural barriers, and away from the creature's path. He set traps, creating obstacles that slowed the predator and allowed his team to maneuver safely. Not a single member of Kale's group panicked. They followed his guidance with trust, executing strategies that seemed almost instinctive. The alien girl watched in disbelief as Kale's calm strategy outmaneuvered a creature that could have destroyed them all. She felt an unfamiliar sensation, admiration mixed with fear. For the first time, she realized that humans were not what she had believed. They were controlled, patient, and capable of surviving dangers that would overwhelm even the strongest aliens. After the predator had moved on, Zarina's team regrouped, battered and shaken. The alien girl finally approached Kale. How do you stay so calm?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Kale looked at her, his expression serene. "Calmness is not weakness," he said softly. "It is preparation, observation, and understanding. Panic wastes energy, clouding judgment. Survival is not about fighting the loudest or fastest. It is about enduring and adapting." Zarina did not respond immediately. She could feel the weight of his words pressing on her pride. For years, she had believed strength was measured by action, speed, and dominance. And yet here was a human, small and seemingly fragile, teaching her that strength could be quiet, controlled, and far more powerful than anything she had known. The trial continued over the next few days. Kale's group faced storms, treacherous terrain, and additional predators, yet they adapted and survived every challenge. They worked together seamlessly, guided by Kale's observation, patience, and strategy. Zarina's team, though capable and strong, struggled with coordination and panic under pressure. Each day, the alien girl's respect for Kale grew, though she would not admit it. By the end of the trial, Kale's group had survived with minimal injury, securing resources and maintaining morale. Zarina's team had suffered losses, injuries, and setbacks. The difference was undeniable. Kale's quiet leadership had proven that human endurance, patience, and observation were strengths unmatched by raw power alone. That evening, as the students returned to the academy, Zarina could not shake her thoughts. She had mocked Kale, laughed at his fragility, and assumed humans were weak. Yet he had survived where stronger, faster, and more confident students had struggled. She realized finally that humans possessed a strength she had never understood, a strength born of survival, adaptation, and controlled patience. Kale, as always, remained quiet. He did not boast, did not seek recognition, and did not gloat. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the alien girl's prideful energy. And yet, the lessons he had taught through action were clear. Strength was not always visible, and the quiet, patient, and prepared could survive where the loud and confident might fail. That night Zarina sat alone, reflecting on everything she had witnessed. She had entered the trial with arrogance, expecting to dominate, but she had learned something far more important. The human boy she had mocked was not weak. He was controlled, capable, and frighteningly effective without needing to display his strength. And she knew, deep down, that this realization would change her. She had underestimated humans for too long. She had laughed at their size, their apparent fragility, and their quiet nature. But she had seen the truth now. Humans survived because they endured, adapted, and observed. They were dangerous not because they sought to dominate, but because they could survive anything, anywhere, and still rise stronger. The Academy would never see humanity the same way again. And Zarina, proud and skilled as she was, had learned a lesson she would never forget. Underestimating humans was a mistake, and survival could teach truths that arrogance never could. The stage was set for what would come next, a test not of skill, not of endurance alone, but of understanding, respect, and the power of controlled strength. The alien girl, once mocking and proud, had begun to see the human boy and his species in a new light. And she knew that the next challenge would reveal even more than she could imagine. The Academy's halls were quieter than usual the morning after the survival trial. The jungle planet had tested every student's skills, patience, and endurance. Most students were exhausted, bruised, and shaken. Some were quietly proud of surviving, while others silently admitted their limitations. Zarina walked through the corridors with a mix of pride and uncertainty. She had led her team as best she could, relying on instinct and strength, yet Kale's group had clearly outperformed hers. The human boy she had once mocked now carried an unspoken authority, a calm presence that demanded respect without effort. When the teachers called the students to the main auditorium, they were greeted by a wall-sized projection of the trial's results. Statistics, observations, and evaluations filled the screens. The instructors praised all students for their performance, but one name stood out: Kale. The human had survived every challenge, led his team efficiently, and demonstrated skills that far surpassed what any of the instructors had expected. Some students whispered among themselves. Others stared in disbelief. Zarina's heart sank as she realized the extent of the human's accomplishment. Kale approached the podium quietly when the instructors called him forward. He did not raise his voice or gesture dramatically. He simply stood, calm and composed, and accepted the recognition. The applause was polite, measured, but sincere. Zarina could not bring herself to clap. She had underestimated him, doubted him, and even mocked him. Now she felt the weight of her misjudgment, an unfamiliar humility settling in her chest. The instructors explained that the trial had not been merely a test of survival. It had been designed to show that strength could take many forms: raw power, intelligence, observation, patience, and adaptability. They noted that Kale's performance had demonstrated all of these qualities in balance. The other students listened intently, some impressed, some confused, and some quietly envious. Zarina, however, felt a storm of emotions. She had always measured strength by dominance, speed, and visible ability. Kale had shown her that true strength was more subtle, more controlled, and far more powerful than she had imagined. Later that day, students were given time to rest and reflect. Zarina found herself walking toward the practice fields, where Kale was quietly studying maps and reviewing strategies. She stopped a few meters away, unsure how to begin. She had no words of mockery prepared, no sarcasm, nothing that could compare to the weight of what she had seen. Finally, she spoke. "Why didn't you fight back?" Her voice was softer than she expected. Kale looked up, his expression calm as always. "Because fighting is easy," he said. "Surviving, understanding, and adapting is what matters. Strength without control is meaningless. Survival is not about proving yourself to others. It is about enduring, learning, and preparing for what comes next." Zarina frowned, thinking carefully. His words were simple, but their meaning was profound. He had survived every challenge not by showing off, not by dominating, but by using patience, observation, and calculated action. She had assumed he was weak because he had not reacted to her insults. Now she understood that his restraint had been deliberate, controlled, and far stronger than any visible display of power. Over the next few days, the Academy held meetings to discuss the results of the trial and what they revealed about each species. Humanity's performance became the subject of intense discussion. Instructors praised Kale's leadership, intelligence, and strategy. Other students who had once laughed at humans quietly admitted that they had been wrong. Even Zarina's peers looked at her differently, as if asking silently how she had failed to see the truth. Zarina approached Kale again. How can your species survive so much?" she asked, her pride tempered by curiosity. Kale looked at her calmly. "We survived because we learned from every mistake, every failure. We adapted to disasters, wars, and crises. We survived when stronger species might have fallen. That is what makes humans different." She listened carefully, finally realizing the depth of what he was saying. Humans were not the weakest. They were not lucky. They had endured, adapted, and grown stronger through experience. Their strength was controlled, subtle, and often invisible to those who only measured by outward display. The human boy she had mocked had become a symbol of a species' hidden power, and she could not ignore it. The Academy then announced a final exercise for the semester, a joint strategy and history challenge. Each student would be paired with members from different species to solve complex simulations that combined survival, diplomacy, and history. The goal was to demonstrate understanding, collaboration, and the ability to apply knowledge practically. Zarina was paired with Kale's group, though she had been assigned to lead a separate team initially. She had no choice but to work alongside him. At first, she tried to assert her authority, giving orders and instructions. Kale, however, did not compete for dominance. He offered advice calmly, suggested strategies, and observed carefully. His input was concise, effective, and always accurate. Zarina began to notice a pattern. When she tried to dominate, her team faltered. When Kale guided calmly, the team succeeded. The first simulation involved negotiating with a neutral species over access to resources on a contested planet. Zarina's instinct was to assert dominance, relying on her species, reputation, and power. Kale's approach was different. He analyzed the neutral species' culture, listened carefully to their concerns, and suggested compromises that would satisfy all parties. The result was a successful negotiation without conflict. Zarina could not argue with the outcome, though her pride bristled at being outperformed without a fight. The next simulation required survival in a hostile environment while protecting a valuable resource. Zarina's team struggled initially, panicking when unexpected obstacles appeared. Kale's guidance, calm and precise, helped them navigate storms, predators, and dangerous terrain. The alien girl watched in awe as his strategies minimized risk and ensured success. She realized that he did not seek recognition. He only sought solutions, and that made him far more effective than anyone who relied solely on instinct or aggression. By the end of the exercise, it was clear that Kale's approach had succeeded where raw power and confidence had failed. The instructors praised the teams, noting that collaboration, observation, and controlled strategy were often more effective than dominance. Zarina, usually proud and competitive, found herself standing beside Kale not as a superior, but as a student learning from him. That evening, she approached him once more. "I underestimated you," she admitted quietly. "I thought humans were weak, that you could be ignored." "I was wrong." Kale looked at her calmly, his expression serene. "Strength is not always visible," he said. "Survival, patience, and understanding are often more powerful than speed or force. What matters is how you use your abilities, not how they appear." Zarina reflected on the past weeks. She had mocked him, assumed he was fragile, and even laughed at his restraint. Yet he had survived every challenge, led his team effectively, and demonstrated a strength she could not match. For the first time, she felt true respect for another being, not out of fear, but out of admiration for what he had achieved through patience and understanding. The final evaluation of the semester arrived. The instructors summarized the results. Humans had proven that apparent weakness could hide incredible strength. Kale's performance had demonstrated that survival was not only about physical ability, but about patience, observation, and the ability to adapt to any situation. The students had learned a lesson that would change how they viewed humans forever. Zarina stood quietly as the instructors concluded their assessment. She no longer saw Kale as a weak, fragile human. She saw a being capable of endurance, strategy, and calm leadership in ways her own instincts could not replicate. She realized that mocking him had been a mistake, and that underestimating humans was a grave error. When the academy dismissed the students, Zarina approached Kale one final time. I want to learn, she said softly. Not just from the lessons, but from you, from your species. Kale nodded calmly. Then observe, listen, and understand. Strength is not always obvious, but it is always present when needed. For Zarina, the journey had changed her. She had begun the semester confident in her superiority, mocking a human boy she assumed was weak. By the end, she had learned that strength was not always measured by appearances, speed, or power. It could be quiet, controlled, and far more dangerous than arrogance. She had learned respect, humility, and the value of observation. As the students returned to their homes across the galaxy, the Academy records were updated. Humanity's performance was highlighted as a model of endurance, strategy, and hidden strength. Teachers and students alike began to see humans differently, not as fragile or weak, but as a species capable of surviving the impossible and thriving where others might fail. Zarina walked beside Kale, not as someone mocking or challenging him, but as someone who had learned from him. She could feel her pride still burning, but it was tempered by understanding and respect. For the first time, she saw a human not as a joke, but as a being capable of lessons she could never forget. The Academy's halls echoed with new energy. Students whispered about the human boy who had changed perceptions, challenged assumptions, and proven that endurance and patience could outmatch strength and confidence. Zarina, proud and skilled though she was, knew that she had witnessed something extraordinary, a quiet strength that demanded respect, not fear, and a lesson that would stay with her for a lifetime. And as Kale walked forward, calm and steady, the alien girl understood the truth of humanity. They did not rise by being the strongest in obvious ways. They survived, endured, and adapted, and that was a strength no one could ever underestimate. The semester ended, but the lesson remained. Strength was not always loud, power was not always visible, and survival, above all, was a quiet art, one humans had mastered better than anyone else. Zarina had started the journey mocking him. She ended it respecting him. And she knew that this respect was the beginning of something far greater, an understanding of what it truly meant to survive, endure, and rise. Humanity had taught. The alien girl mocked her human classmate.